hoping to achieve?
Well, we want to create 100% clean energy. We need to make a transition in this country. We need to show leadership, and that's what we're here to represent.
We're going this way.
What do you say to critics who say you go on yachts, you're traveling, and then here you are trying to get climate change?
Got to get the climate march moving. Sorry.
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Greene. You're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is, I believe, Wednesday, September 24th. 2014, and the President of the United States speaks at the UN General Assembly, the 69th, really just kind of an Illuminati orgy in Manhattan today. And I wanted to note three striking facets of this conversation in his speech that was in striking opposition to the speech he gave last year in 2013, where he talked about withdrawing troops from Iraq, ending the wars in Afghanistan, and ending really all U.S.-led invasions in the Middle East, has now diametrically opposed himself and his own words and is actively bombing, striking both Iraq and Syria with the hundreds and hundreds of airstrikes. Of course, all this was predicted on my channel, has been for the past 5 years now. Of course, anytime the president says that he's not going to do something, expect him to do it. Expect him to do the exact opposite. Of course, it's just the liberal, leftist bullshit paradigm way of massaging the American public and their mushy little brains into war while they're perplexed by keeping up with the Kardashians and anything else that is turning their brains to mush. And of course, all of this propaganda. Now, three things that the president talked about today in Manhattan at the UN General Assembly. War in both Iraq and Syria, again a sharp contrast from what he talked about the year prior and virtually his entire campaign running for presidency. Two, Ebola, speaking to the Ebola outbreak within the same paragraph as he's also talking about Iraq and Syria. Now keep in mind, I also have done several videos linking Ebola and a covert military operation where the president has set up AFRICOM and command centers, military command centers in Western Sub-Saharan Africa as a ploy and as a way to establish a military command post in this part of the world near Northern Africa, Libya, sending 3,000 troops with, again, no experience containing a virus. I guess they're just going to shoot at the virus with their guns. And also what's happening in the Middle East. Obama, again, promising no ground troops, but sending mysteriously, at the same time he starts these aggressive bombing campaigns in Iraq and Syria, 3,000 U.S. armed ground troops to Sub-Saharan Africa. And he speaks to Ebola in the same sentence, almost, as he's also talking about Iraq and Syria. So this just gives me more confidence that this is in fact a covert operation. Of course, you can read about all of this at the State Department's website. You can Google search AFRICOM to learn about these military command centers that they're setting up in Africa with convenient, perfect timing at the same time we're engaging in a global war. An all-out war, what people think is a regional war in the Middle East, but it is in reality a world war. He also talks about climate change, which I find is funny, as he's flying Air Force One, his private jets, burning all kinds of fossil fuels, spending millions of dollars on his vacations, owning tons of real estate, and talking about how, you know, we really need to get serious about climate change. I saw Leonardo DiCaprio, also an actor that I appreciate his talent, also marching in New York City just a few days ago with the climate change rally, and of course talks taking place in Manhattan, but also just kind of a farce in and of itself, having recently rented one of the largest and most expensive yachts on the planet during the recent World Cup and owning dozens and dozens of home and flying private jets. You see, it's always these very wealthy elites burning all the fossil fuels, telling us that America and the world needs to get its shit together regarding climate change. So very important that you listen and you read between the lines about what Obama was talking about today with his speech at the UN General Assembly. And of course, America now at war, not just in Iraq, not just in Syria, not just previously at wars with Libya, but this all turning into a global conflagration and an all-out war in engagement in the Middle East, soon to be global war. Now the CDC, since I made, and I've made a few of Ebola videos talking about how the CDC was lying to you, that they had only estimated, a few dozen cases, and then it was, a few thousand cases, and then, 10,000, infections projected, has now magnified, doubling, according to the CDC, the Centers of Disease Control, and WHO, doubling every 20 days. And they say it can get as bad as 1.4 million infections, cases by the end of January. And again, you can punch the numbers on that. If it's doubling every 20 days, according to the CDC, to make it easy, let's just say it's doubling every 30 days. Let's say the infections at the end of January, instead of 1.4 million, are 1.5 million. If we double, we go to 3, we go to 6, we go to 12, we go to 24 million. In just a couple of months, you can see how this can extrapolate and become our worst fears, become the Hollywood movies that we've seen, like Outbreak, and the infection spreading until it wipes out half of the population, becomes the new Dark Ages and the modern form of the bubonic plague. Also, the New England Journal of Medicine, another very credible source, warns that the Ebola virus and infection could become endemic, meaning that it could be just a part of our human population gene code for years to come in these parts of the world, meaning that it can't be contained. Again, the CDC estimates that by September, 21,000 infections are expected, and they say that their margin of error is about 2.5 times. So times what they're telling you by 2.5 times. They say the number of infections could be 21,000 by the end of September this month. The tally can be up to 1.4 million cases by the end of January 15, 2015. Every person that's infected infects 2 other people at this given point in time. And again, the infections, according to the CDC, doubling every 20 days at a very increasing magnitude, obviously very serious in nature. Now, the CDC pointed out from the research that I've read, that they say that in order to stop all these infections, they need to quarantine at least 70% of the population infected by the virus. Now, this to me sounds completely and utterly unrealistic to expect a 70% quarantine of those infected with the disease, especially in this part of the world. I think it would be difficult to do in Western, more civilized countries with better medicine, like Europe and the United States, for example, yet alone places like Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, where the outbreak has originated and where it is spreading rapidly and potentially infecting us here at home. Again, the U.S. federal government and Homeland Security that's supposed to protect us is still allowing plane flights to come in from these parts of the world into the United States. They're also bringing patients that were infected overseas back to the United States, which I have an answer and a very likely reason why they're doing that. Many of you know, at least those of you truthers out there that have been investigating the truth, regarding Ebola, that the CDC has the patent on the Ebola virus. And virtually 70% of all strains coming off the Zaire form, which could potentially be airborne. Again, a total lie to think that this disease could not mutate in the very near future, become airborne. They've already done studies, namely in Canada, where they've seen the virus transmissible in airborne form, traveling through the air in pigs and monkeys. But the CDC owning the patent on the Ebola virus. Isn't that curious? Isn't it curious that the CDC stands to make millions, if not billions, on curing this very extreme, aggressive outbreak that is so severe that it's on the docket during President Obama's speeches when he's talking about bombing Iraq and Syria. In the next sentence, he talks about Ebola. Again, this kind of looks like a global, international agenda. Maybe to stoke fears, maybe to perhaps eradicate large swaths of portions of the human population, and then to profit on the cure and profit from the patent on the disease, the vaccination that maybe at the point when it spreads to millions and millions of people, again, doubling every 20 days according to the CDC, will be a mandatory vaccination here in the United States. And if you don't take the pill, if you don't take the vaccine, they might just have to quarantine you in a concentration camp or very aggressive medical facility and allow you to, unfortunately, but conveniently, die off. You know, I find all this amazing. Again, war, Ebola, and climate change all being talked about at the 69th UN General Assembly. All this coming, of course, from a scumbag liar, the President of the United States, who just a year ago talked about ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was his entire campaign and his re-election. Now at war with numerous countries, a regional war, the entire Middle East, which is soon to outbreak into a world conflict. I believe we are already there, folks. Also, the President condemned today Russia for what they say invading Ukraine. And don't you find that interesting? They're condemning Russia, even though they haven't invaded Ukraine at all, but that's kind of the propaganda and language that the United States is using. Condemning Russia for the alleged invasion of Ukraine, while at the same time, America, I guess, just shows us a double standard, is attacking on the offensive numerous countries in the Middle East, namely Iraq and Syria. And of course, civilians dying as a result, men, women, and children. These are war crimes being perpetrated by the United States federal government, the President of the United States, Western interests. There's no other way to cut it or slice it. This invasion is also illegal. It's anti-congressional, and it's exactly why the rest of the global superpowers, namely China and Russia, are scrambling for a solution. Many surmise that nuclear Cold War that many of us feared years ago and years past might be coming to fruition in the not too distant future, as both Russia and China have warned repeatedly in months past and in years past that if the United States took any action in Damascus, Syria, and places like Iraq, that there would be dire and severe consequences. We're about to see what those consequences are, America. And again, I pray that things work out. But the way things are materializing, it really is our worst fears. And your government, the president, all responsible. I'm Christopher Greene. Get it out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor. Is your prepper kit complete? Solar Platinum 60 delivers 60 watts of power to charge all of your mobile devices. On a single charge, you can charge 11 smartphones, 4 tablets, or your laptop. Charge via solar or AC in just a few hours. That's Solar Platinum 60. Click the link below right now.